I've received a number of requests for a video outlining the gear I use for exploring abandoned mines. Well, finally, here is that video. It took several years of painful trial and error to get what I think is the perfect mix of gear that I have now, and I'm happy to show that off in just a moment. I will also post links in the description below to all the equipment that I'm showing, so if you want more information on it or you want to buy it yourself, easy for you to do that. So, with that, let's get into it. So this is it. This is all of my gear for exploring abandoned mines. The only pieces of equipment that I use that you're not seeing right now are the camera I'm shooting with and the stabilizer I use. However, I will show those in a moment when I start focusing in on individual pieces of equipment. So the way it works is all of this stuff actually fits in that plastic box right there. And so I'll just toss that into whichever vehicle we're using to get to the mines. And then once we arrive there, there is usually a hike or riding a motorcycle involved to get to the actual mine itself, not just as far as you can drive. And so at that point, I have to make a guess as to which pieces of equipment I'll need the most, and I'll transfer those to the backpack and either hike or ride on from there. So some stuff always gets left behind. Of course, usually the stuff that gets left behind is the stuff you actually end up needing, but that's life. One thing you'll probably notice is that a lot of this equipment is somewhat dirty. So just right there. And anyone that has experience with mining or exploring mines, whether active or not, will probably confirm that it is almost impossible to stay clean. They're very dirty, muddy environments, and so, yeah, getting dirty is pretty much a fact of life in a mine. So, with that said, let's start focusing on individual pieces of equipment. I thought it seemed logical to start with the cameras since we're shooting a video. And the camera I'm actually using right now is this one, the Sony DSC-RX100. And this one here is actually from a generation before. This is the Sony DSC-RX100, and you'll notice it's fairly compact, and that's pretty relevant if you're taking long hikes to mines or have to ride the bikes in and you don't have a lot of space. Also, you really don't want to bring an expensive camera into an abandoned mine. You can see how battered this one is. I mean, you're going to beat the hell out of your cameras, or you're going to beat the hell out of all your gear, really, but the cameras are really going to take a beating. They're covered in dust and mud and that sort of thing. So you want a fairly sturdy, also relatively lightweight camera, and these Sonys really seem to fit the bill with that. I've really abused them badly over the years, and yet they're still working great. So I definitely recommend those. Next up, you guys will probably recognize this. This is a GoPro Hero 5. Perhaps the most useful thing about this is that it's waterproof, and that's good if you're guaranteed to get wet or you need to swim across the winds or something like that. It's great for that. Just a backup battery right there. This right here is a chest mount, so you can strap it across your chest if you want to film yourself, riding a motorcycle, or just you need both your hands for something, you're climbing down something or whatever. It's good for filming with that. This vehicle mount, in case you want to film, traveling in a truck or whatever. This is my phone, of course. This is the LG G4, which is sort of a backup to the backup camera. And I have used it at times when all the other cameras run out of batteries or have issues for one reason or another. Also with this is there's a really useful GPS app on this. The app I'm referring to is simply called US Topo Maps, and I've actually definitely got my money's worth out of this one. I think it costs $9 to download, and I've really got my money's worth out of it. What you can do is you can download all these topo maps, and so you can use them offline, because often you don't have phone service when you get out to some of these remote places. But you can turn on the location, the GPS location on the phone, and it'll show you where you are on the topo map. And so you can follow these old historic roads, or you can find these you just follow the added symbol to get you where you want to go. And I found it extremely useful. Also, when you're trying to pick the best route, suppose you're traveling cross country or something, if you're traveling in that manner, you definitely want to know, what the steepest routes and such are, and so it's useful for that as well. So I would definitely put this on my top gear list. You may notice that the camera footage is a bit shakier now, and the reason for that is that I have taken the camera off of the stabilizer, which you see in front of you. This is the Crane M, and I'm filming it on top of the handy carrying case that comes with it. And what can I really say about this? I mean, this does wonders for smoothing out the footage. It avoids that jerky motion that we all too often see with YouTube videos where somebody's got the camera in their hand, they get excited, and it's just kind of swinging around all over the place. This, I have just beaten the hell out of this as well because it's attached to the camera. So I've dropped it in water, I've dunked it in mud. I've just really abused this as well, and yet it just keeps on working. So I'm impressed with the durability of this. Moving on with our cameras, in front of me now is the Mavic Pro quadcopter, or drone as they're more commonly referred to. This is great for overhead shots, as you guys are probably aware. This is the drone itself right here. That's a backup battery there. These things really suck the batteries down quickly, and so I almost always use the backup one as well when I go out. So I definitely recommend getting 2 batteries if you guys get a drone. That's the controller right there. Those are little arms on the bottom. They swing down and you attach your phone there, and then you can see what the drone is seeing on your phone screen. Another thing that people might not think of as much is these are useful not just for footage, but they're also good for scouting out areas. There was a mine recently that we checked out. It looked fantastic online, looking at it from Google Earth, but it was just a brutal hike to get up to it through brush and cliffs and that sort of thing. So when we got to the site, we sent the drone up, and we were able to get a closer look at it with the drone, and it revealed that it had eroded shut. So we saved ourselves a miserable afternoon getting up to the site by simply sending the drone up. And the time that we saved, we actually found another really cool mine with. So it's useful for a variety of things. As I mentioned before, dust and mud are constants in abandoned mines, and for that reason I find this canned air here useful for blowing dust out of these expensive electronics and hopefully postponing their eventual breakdown from wear and tear. I forgot to mention earlier as well, you always have to bring backup batteries when you go out exploring abandoned mines. This is a backup for the phone. These are 2 backups for the cameras. I've used all those batteries up before, and that's why you've got the backup cameras, because you just keep having to work your way down your desirability of cameras until you are completely out. And when you're completely out, I've got this, which is a backup charger. I forget the exact model number, but I will look it up and post that on the screen. This will actually charge all your electronics several times before it itself runs out, and that is always proved sufficient for me, because you can also charge stuff off of your vehicle or whatever. So I've definitely drained this to nothing, but I've never completely run out of all juice on a trip before, and that's in great part thanks to this. So it's definitely save your trip to an abandoned mine if you want to document a bunch of stuff. These have been on the screen a lot, and I keep passing over them. These are Motorola two-way radios, really handy if you're out exploring with somebody else. You can split up and cover a much larger area and stay in touch in case one or the other of you finds something really cool. These are waterproof, very important. They even have a little light on the bottom, which isn't great, but it has saved us on more than one occasion when all your other lights fail for battery usage or they break down on you or whatever. So that has been useful. The range on these depends on the vegetation and if you're in a mountain or a valley or whatever, but we usually get 2-3 miles out of those, and that's usually sufficient. Like I said, very useful. We use those almost every trip we go out, so it'll save you some time and hassle. Time and hassle is a good segue to talking about this next piece of equipment, and these are waders, chest waders to be specific. And man, these are a lifesaver in the abandoned mines. Here in Northern California, almost all the abandoned mines are flooded. But even in places like Nevada, you're going to come across flooded mines fairly often. Same thing in even the dry parts of Italy. Lots of flooded mines I came across there. And these make such a difference. Going through, ruining your boots, being freezing and cold with your pants and just everything soaked. It's just awful. Not to mention, you're much more likely to ruin your electronics if you're all wet. And these are just great. Nothing stops them. Mud, freezing water, you just charge right on through. It's fantastic. These have a pocket up top as well. Waterproof pocket where I put batteries and things like that in there, which is pretty handy as well. So definitely one of our best purchases was getting these. And these are really cheap. These are, I think I paid $60 for these. And they're pretty rugged. I mean, despite the horrific abuse they're subjected to in the abandoned mines, they last for years. Don't get the fancy kind that people wear when they go fishing and such. You're going to completely ruin those. Moving on, time and hassle. That is mosquito netting. That is bug spray. Both of those are going to come into handy in wet environments. Northern California, where even in Nevada, there have been places where we've got a lot of bugs, and that's one of those things you won't use on every trip, but man, it is nice to have it when you need it. Below that is a machete, and you know, again, you won't necessarily use that so much in a place like Nevada, but in Northern California, you get through some of these really thicket, awful places full of willow and blackberries and things like that, and it is sure nice to be able to just hack your way through. So that, again, that doesn't get used all the time, but when it does get used, it's real nice to have. This is the Heckler Koch P2000 in 40 caliber, and this is actually for the human predators rather than the animal predators. Although I suppose you could argue that we're all animals, but I think you know what I mean. And this does not get brought with us on every trip, but if we're going to a relatively unknown area or an area where we know it's not uncommon to have meth labs or grow operations or whatever, then this gets brought with us. We've only actually had occasion to need the pistol once, and that was actually a couple of years ago when we surprised a group mining illegally out in the middle of nowhere, and I really mean out in the middle of nowhere. They were not expecting us, and so when we actually weren't expecting them either, but when we rolled up on them, they became quite hostile very quickly. They had AR-15s and started reaching for them. And fortunately, my buddy had his pistol handy, and all it took was him putting his hand on it, and the suggestion of what we were capable of was enough for them to pause, and it prevented the situation from escalating more. I'm not saying they would have killed us, but I think they would have done unpleasant things to us, and it was nice to be able to avoid having that done. There was sort of a tense standoff, and then both sides sort of went their own way. And like I said, I think that would have been a lot worse had we not been armed. So, you know, that's the only time something like that's ever happened. It's certainly not a common thing, but hey, you know what? If it saves your life or prevents you from having really bad, unpleasant things done to you, then, hey, I think it's worth having. Alright, moving over to the other side of the blanket. This is a handheld GPS unit. This is the Garmin GPS 64S. This is much more precise than the phone, and sometimes it can get a signal when the phone can't. So this is great if you want to get right on top of an adit in an area that's got heavy brush and things like that, because the application on the phone, it gets you close, but it wants you to get right on top of it. So this is very useful for that. Also, if you want to mark your position, useful for that. So this doesn't get used on every trip, but it's one of those things that when you need it, you're real glad to have it. These are gas meters, and these are extremely important when exploring abandoned mines. You really don't want to go in without at least an oxygen meter, which is what this device on the right is. This one on the left is manufactured by BW Technologies and measures hydrogen sulfide. Fortunately, that one has never gone off, but it's nice to have all the same. The number 10 right there tells you how many months of battery life it has left. And I actually was using a BW Technologies oxygen meter up until last year, and when that one expired, I tried out this Macurco. I bought this Macurco, and I love it so far. My complaint with the BW Technologies oxygen meter is that it didn't show what the actual percentage of oxygen was. It would just trigger an alarm when you dipped below 19.5% oxygen levels, but you didn't know how much below you were. And so it could go off at 19.4%, which would be perfectly fine to proceed. You just didn't know. You kind of had to just assess your, how you were feeling, what your symptoms were, to make a guess as to whether you could proceed or not. And the beauty of this one is that, okay, it triggers at 19.5%, and that you can just sort of use as a measure, like, okay, I need to start paying attention to the oxygen levels inside this mine. But if it's at 19.3%, whatever, it's perfectly fine to keep going. And so you just keep an eye on it, so it dips down to, say, 13% or something like that. You got to start thinking about getting out of there. And so I find it much more useful and actually safe to use this Macurco. And I'm just really happy with this. It's easy to calibrate, and really happy with it so far. It's the first time I've used one of their products, but I really like it. Okay, another important thing are lights. I use a light on my helmet here. By the way, helmet's important too. And I use a handheld light. That one on the middle right now. I used to use this one, the Coast HP550. Fantastic light, but it's not rechargeable. And last year I spent almost $1,000 on batteries exploring abandoned mines. And so I was so happy when they came out with this rechargeable model, which is just as bright, but is rechargeable. And that is the Coast HP10R. I absolutely love Coast products. I know I'm not getting paid to say that, but I love their products. I have horribly abused their flashlights, and I also had a Coast headlamp I used last year. I used that horribly as well. And these products have never broken down on me, never failed. I've never run the battery out on these either, which is incredible because I have spent hours and hours and hours underground, and they just keep going. Really, really like their products. Their website's not that user-friendly. I've actually never even figured out how to order off of their website. I just call them up. They're super friendly, and they'll take care of you, but you do have to call, at least in my experience, rather than be able to order online. And also on Amazon, I've seen their stuff is either hard to find or super expensive. So if you want to buy a Coast light, which I really recommend, I would just call them. Oh yeah, and this is not very heavy either. This one's pretty heavy, but this one is, God, it's even, that's less than maybe a pound or so. That's just an estimate, but that's pretty light. And you get this nice little carrying case, and here's the box it comes in. Real nice light. I definitely like that a lot. The headlamp I use is a Fenix. This is the HP30R, to be specific. Also rechargeable. And this one has a bunch of different settings. The brightest setting goes up to 1,750 lumens, which is pretty bright. And here's the battery pack. I just put this in my back pocket when I'm exploring, and let the cord run down my back, because I don't want that. You can put that on the helmet, but to me that's too heavy. I don't like having that much weight on my head. And I just put this on the floodlight mode, and it sort of fills in the light when I'm filming. I use the flashlight primarily. The great thing about the Coast lights is they've got an adjustable focus. You just slide this up or down, and that'll shift it from either floodlight to spotlight. And so that way I can focus in on something specific, or show a view down and at it quite a ways, or I can just sort of focus on the area around me. And if you're doing the floodlight, it won't wash out whatever you're trying to show. And so I just keep this all the time on floodlight, to sort of fill in light when I'm using the spotlight on this one, if that makes sense. I had to switch. I had a Coast light that I was using on my helmet, but I had to switch over to the Fenix because of PWM. And if you don't know what that is, I would Google it for more details, but basically what it is the way the light cycles will create this flickering effect on the camera. You can't see it with the naked eye, but it'll come up on video. And the Coach light I had was doing that, so I had to switch to the Fenix that doesn't do that. But these Coach lights don't do that as well. It was just the headlamp that was doing that. So still love Coast, but I had to switch to the Fenix because of the PWM. I've never had my lights fail me underground, but you really don't want to be without a light underground. And so bring these as well. Light sticks just in case, you never know. They can also be useful if you want to mark where you've been, you know, mark an X or something like that. So they're good to have because, again, losing light underground, you're really going to be screwed. Okay, these are actually just cheap bicycle gloves I picked up at a little supermarket. And I throw these on before I go underground, just, you know, because sometimes you're running your hand over rusty nails or sharp rocks, whatever. I found it's nice to have those. So I usually throw those on before I go underground. Just above them is this collapsible walking stick, and that's very useful for its intended purpose. A lot of these mines don't have trails or anything like that going to them anymore, and so you've got to side hill it or just go up these cliffs, things like that, and it can be really, really nice to have that to stabilize yourself, especially when you're carrying a heavy backpack full of mine exploring gear. However, this is also useful when you're actually underground, particularly in the flooded mines. If you're not sure what's in front of you because the water's muddy or something like that, you can poke around and prevent yourself from stepping into a winze or something unpleasant. So I have used it on many occasions and found it very useful. Also, you often trip on things when you can't see what's in the water, such as old timbers or rocks, and it can help you prevent doing that as well. And there's just all kinds of uses for this, you know, moving rattlesnakes out of the way, whatever. It's very cheap, but I have found it to be quite useful. I'm sure most of you recognize that Snickers chocolate bar, and always bring those on a mine trip. And I usually eat one just before I go into a mine. It gives you a quick energy boost that lasts for a while, and it fills you up so you're not hungry and you can focus on what you're doing. And also, I throw one or two of them in my pack when I go underground, because sometimes the mines are a lot bigger than you expect, and after a few hours of exploring, you get kind of low blood sugar, low energy, and you have one of those, it's better than a power bar, I think. So I always take a Snickers or 3 or 4 with me. Water. I always bring a ton of water too. You know, it really sucks to run out of water, and it can be fatal in the right circumstances. So I always bring lots of water. You know, I make fun of Bear Grylls and everybody else, but I gotta say, this Bear Grylls water container, it's got that vacuum interior, and so it keeps the water really cold. I can put ice in there, and it's still gonna have pieces of ice floating around in it the next day. And so it's awesome for keeping drinks cold. So that's sort of the primary one I use, and you know, I'll drink those first and have that one in reserve. Really, really important to bring lots of water. I just put those in there to remind myself to talk about the fact that we also have dirt bikes we use, and you know, high clearance 4-wheel drive. It's gonna be something that you're gonna use quite often. So that was just kind of a reminder to talk about that. Sturdy pair of boots, you're definitely gonna want that. You can see how beat up and muddy those are. You don't want that to be your feet, or a nice pair of shoes. So I always will have those with me. I'm either wearing these or the waders. So you definitely want to get a sturdy pair of boots. And speaking of that, just to emphasize again, you probably want to have a helmet with you as well. This is, what brand is this? This is a Petzl helmet, and it doesn't come with this light, obviously. You buy the helmet, and it's got these fasteners in here and such that you can just wrap the light around. So good piece of equipment to have as well. So that is a rough overview of the equipment that I bring with me. I'm very happy to answer any questions that somebody might have, and as I've said before, I will have a link for all these different products in the description below, if you want more information or you wish to make a purchase of your own.